much love. Be blessed with long life. Yet we have another black woman, this time in Detroit, who was shot 6 times by a white police officer during a traffic stop. Now I'm going to show you this news video, which they're going to frame a totally different narrative than we see this police chief frame. Finally, we do have a police chief that is standing up and condemning his officers for firing upon this lady, and this video was fair use for literary and commentary purposes only. Just watch.
Thank you. We got to tell you about a woman recovering in the hospital this morning. This was after a traffic stop turned into shots fired by police on Detroit's east side.
Now, it all began when an officer attempted to pull a woman over along Van Dyke near 8 Mile. Police say she sped off and almost hit officers as they tried to cut her off nearby, which led to officers opening fire.
And 7 News Detroit reporter Brittany Tulis is joining us live from DPD headquarters this morning. And Brittany, walk us through what happened here.
Yeah, Alicia, Allie, DPD's Chief Todd Bettison says this all started with a traffic stop and just escalated from there. The first officers used pepper spray, then the suspect took off. The second time police stopped her, an officer fired multiple shots, hitting the suspect. Then she started driving away again. Now, this is right before those gunshots at East Outer Drive. The suspect's SUV is about to turn left on Concord when a DPD squad cuts her off. Another squad pulls up behind the suspect, boxing her in. The SUV reverses as an officer can be seen stepping back, heard yelling commands, then firing up to 10 times, hitting the driver. Both arms and one leg were injured. The suspect then drove over a mile to DPD's Metro base on Sherwood, where she got help, ending the chase. Now, this all started near Van Dyke and Savage Avenues with a traffic stop for not having valid plates. The driver called 911 herself, asking to talk to another officer. Chief Todd Bettison says that happened, but the driver still wouldn't give police her valid license or registration. Officers did get her out of the vehicle, and pepper spray was ultimately used. Chief Bettison says she got back in the SUV and drove about a mile to Concord and East Outer Drive, where she'd be shot by officers.
I'm happy to report that she's in stable condition. She will survive. But my message to the public, when you're driving a vehicle and you're pulled over, you have to comply. You have to, by state law, you have to provide your driver's license. You don't have the opportunity to say, I'm not going to provide my driver's license during a traffic stop. Some folks just don't know that.
And the driver is facing multiple charges, including fleeing and eluding. And Alicia and Allie, that one is a felony here in the state of Michigan. Live at DPS headquarters, I'm Brittany Tulis for 7 News Detroit this morning.
Yeah, complying with officers when they pull you over. It is law. Brittany.
All right, I'm going to stop it right there because from this point, the news starts drifting into other officer-involved shootings around Detroit. But that's not what we're here for. What really matters is what happened in this particular case. You just heard the police chief talking about you must comply and all that. But once the body cam footage came out, his tone completely changed. That's when the truth started to unravel. The story they first told doesn't quite line up with what actually happened. From what we now know, this woman wasn't out here attacking anybody. She wasn't trying to run anyone over. She simply wanted a supervisor to come to the scene, something every citizen has the right to ask for. Instead, things escalated unnecessarily, and that's where the real issue lies. This isn't just about compliance, it's about accountability. So now I want you to pay close attention to what this chief says next, because what he admits on camera exposes everything we've been saying for years about reckless policing, double standards, and how black lives are treated on the streets of America. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button right now, because this kind of truth needs to be heard. Now let's get into it.
Thank you for coming on short notice. Today, I have called you all here to discuss the officer-involved shooting that happened on yesterday's date, which was Sunday afternoon in the 11th precinct area. Normally, I would not do a media briefing on an OIS, officer-involved shooting, during this short of a time frame. But this morning at my senior management meeting, I was able to review the body-worn camera, and at my briefing yesterday at the scene, I updated you and stated that the information was fluid, preliminary, and that I had not reviewed the camera footage at that moment. I was able to review the body-worn camera footage from the shooting officer and wanted to ensure that, as promised, I would give you all an update. I will not be releasing the body-worn camera footage today because I do not want to jump in front of the Wayne County prosecutor, which is standard in an officer-involved shooting. We will be submitting a warrant request, as we always do in all of our officer-involved shootings, and the investigation will be led by the Michigan State Police Department. But I do want to update you and walk you through what transpired to give you an update. After reviewing the body-worn footage, I can tell you that yesterday afternoon, our officer was out on routine patrol in the area of Van Dyke and 8 Mile. He observed what he deemed to be a traffic violation and conducted a traffic stop. The driver of the vehicle, which was driving a black Dodge Durango, complied with the officer and pulled over her vehicle immediately. At this point, the officer exited the patrol vehicle and approached the driver's side of the Dodge Durango. The officer identified himself and gave the reason for the traffic stop. The driver strongly disagreed with the officer as to the reason. The officer asked the driver for her license, registration, proof of insurance of the vehicle. The driver requested for the officer's supervisor numerous times, including at one point the driver called 911 while the officer was standing at the vehicle. The officer requested backup to the scene for support. Once backup arrived, the officer physically opened the driver's door in an attempt to get the driver out of the vehicle. The officers were unsuccessful in their attempt to pull the woman out of the vehicle, and she was pepper sprayed by one of the backup officers. She then closed her door and the driver drove off from the scene. The officers pursued the Durango up Van Dyke for approximately 1 minute until they boxed in her vehicle a short distance down the road at Concord and Outer Drive. At this point, the officer which fired shots, we'll call him the shooting officer, jumped out of his vehicle that was parked in front of the Dodge Durango and began ordering the woman to exit the vehicle. The driver, as it is shown in the video, began trying to drive her vehicle out of the box. While the Durango was driving away from the scene and past the officer, he ordered the woman 2 more times to get out of the vehicle before he fired multiple shots into the Durango. The shooting officer then jumped back in his squad car and pursued the Durango with the backup units following behind. They pursued, ultimately ending at the Detroit Police Department facility. The driver was shot a total of 6 times. Officers rendered first aid. Medics were called. They transported the woman to a local hospital. The woman was released from the hospital and subsequently taken to the Detroit Detention Center. This morning, I ordered her released from the Detroit Detention Center immediately. I want to talk about the policy violations. This incident has policy violations in multiple areas. I find them concerning. The Detroit Police Department, first of all, should not pursue, and we have a policy against vehicle pursuits for traffic. Our policy states that we will pursue individuals that have committed violent felonies only, violent crimes. DPD also has a policy against the procedure where you box in a vehicle. One vehicle in front, one vehicle behind, in an attempt to stop it from moving. I repeat, DPD we do not shoot at moving vehicles unless it is an extreme circumstance where life is at jeopardy. As an officer, we are trained to de-escalate situations. Failing to request a supervisor when one is requested falls in line with the citizen complaint. She requested a supervisor multiple times. I want you all to know that I am preparing to submit to the Board of Police Commissioners to have the shooting officer suspended without pay immediately. And again, a warrant request will be submitted to the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. This is standard. The actions of the officer in violating our policy is not consistent with what should be done. The officer will be held accountable for that. An internal investigation is going to be headed up by the Homicide Task Force, which is led by the Michigan State Police Department. The driver, as I stated, has been released from the Detroit Detention Center this afternoon and will not be facing any charges from this incident. The Detroit Police Department has policies in place for a reason. We are a constitutional police department, and I definitely will hold officers accountable for policy violations. At this point, I'll open it up for questions.
Thank you, Chief, for that update. It's Andrea from the Detroit Free Press. I know that you have concerns about policy violations, but I was wondering what you would say to critics who may agree with you and say, sorry, I'm getting the questions out, sorry. Like, how would you respond to critics who question whether all of this over an invalid license, essentially, was worth it, was worth all of this?
I'm not going to offer my opinion or speculate at this particular time. It's an ongoing investigation based off the warrant requests being submitted. I don't want to interfere or jeopardize anything in that regard. There could be criminal charges that would result from this, could be, but I'm telling you that there definitely were procedural violations, and I'm holding the officer accountable for that.
Can you tell us more about the officer?
Yes, the officer has 1 year and 9 months on the job. No other citizen complaints and no other pending cases of discipline.
Was he an officer beforehand, or was this his first job?
That I don't know. I don't believe so.
Okay. And then what was the initial traffic stop?
The traffic stop, what the officer stated, speeding, tinted windows, and obscured plate.
All right, thank you.
All right, I'm going to stop it right there because honestly, that last question doesn't even matter anymore. The police chief already said everything we needed to hear. He broke down his own department's actions and made it clear that this entire situation was a mess from start to finish. According to his own words, the officer violated multiple core policies, chasing someone over a traffic violation, boxing her in, and then firing shots into a moving vehicle that posed no threat. Those are not just small mistakes. Those are life and death decisions made carelessly, and this woman almost paid for it with hers. Now think about this for a second. The woman complied when she was first pulled over. She disagreed with the stop, sure, but she asked for a supervisor, something any citizen has the right to do. Instead of respecting that request, the officer decided to get physical. He tried to pull her out of the car, couldn't, pepper sprayed her, and when she tried to leave the chaos to protect herself, they treated her like a fugitive. It's the same story we've seen far too many times: escalation, aggression, and then justification. What stands out to me is the police chief's reaction. For once, we saw a chief who didn't hide behind his officer's badge or issue the usual "we're still investigating" statement. He stood there and admitted it. This should have never happened. And he didn't stop there. He released the woman from custody, called out his officer's misconduct, and made it known there will be consequences. That's rare. That's leadership. And it's sad that something as simple as doing the right thing feels like a breath of fresh air in this country. Let's be real. If this had been a white woman shot by a black officer, this would be national news. That officer would have been in handcuffs before the day ended. But when it's a black woman, we have to beg for people to even pay attention. That's the double standard we live with, and that's why people are fed up. So, salute to that chief. Not because he's perfect, but because he chose truth over silence. He knew this officer was wrong, and he said it publicly. And maybe, just maybe, that's a step toward change. Because what we really want, what we've been asking for, isn't special treatment. It's equal treatment. We just want the law to mean the same thing no matter what color your skin is. And to the sister who survived this, may she heal. May she be compensated, and may her story spark real accountability. Because every time something like this happens, it reminds us that justice in America isn't blind. It's selective. And until that changes, we'll keep calling it out. Once again, I'm not trying to make this about race, but let's be honest with ourselves. If the roles were reversed, we already know how different this story would have been handled. I'm just calling it what it is. Because when you look at how quick some officers are to pull the trigger, and who they usually pull it on, you can't ignore the pattern anymore. It's not about hating cops, it's about demanding accountability and humanity. What we saw here wasn't policing. It was a complete disregard for life. This woman didn't deserve to be treated like an animal on the street. And the sad part? Situations like this keep repeating themselves, over and over. And people still ask, why are folks angry? Well, this right here is why. Because we keep watching the same injustice play out, and the victims always seem to look the same. So yeah, I'll say it plain. That officer's actions speak for themselves. Whether you wear a badge or not, wrong is wrong. And until there's equal accountability, until every officer fears the consequence of abusing power the same way citizens fear the police, nothing will ever truly change. This is the Untold Crime Chronicles. We bring light to the stories others try to brush aside, the truths buried under excuses and paperwork. If this story hit you like it hit me, take a second to subscribe, drop a comment, and let's keep this conversation going. Because awareness is power, and silence only protects the guilty.